a signal, so time to adjust my tie.
Make it too
You're
tight.
live, Mr. Warden.
All right. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call the meeting to order, April 20th, 9 o'clock. First order of business is adoption of our minutes. So everyone has had a chance to read them, and if there's no errors, admissions, I will entertain a motion to accept them.
So moved.
Moved by Mennel and Jones. No further discussion. Catherine? No, Julie, you calling the vote, please.
Deputy Warden Mennel,
Yes.
Councillor McPhail,
Yes.
Councillor Purcell,
Yes.
Councillor Martin,
Yes.
Councillor Jones,
Yes.
Councillor French,
Yes.
Councillor Giguère,
Yes.
Councillor Ketchba,
Yes.
Mr. Warden.
Yes,
9-0, the motion is carried.
thank you for that. Next item is disclosure of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof. Not seeing any hands go up, so we'll assume there are none. The next one is presentation of petitions, presentations, and delegations. I believe we have Ann Haynes and Brenda Slater here. I want to give them a warm welcome, and whenever you're ready, please go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much, Mr. Warden, members of council and staff. It's certainly great to see everyone and have an opportunity to come and speak to you this morning. My name is Brenda Slater, and I think I've met many of you. I am the account manager for Municipal and Stakeholder Relations. And just as interest, the areas I cover are Elgin County, Middlesex County, the City of London, and Chatham-Kent. And I'll start off with the first part of the presentation, and then joining me as well is my new regional manager, Ann Haynes. So I will turn things over to her shortly. As many of you know, MPAC is one of the largest assessment jurisdictions in the province, and the attached slide, you've likely seen this graphic before. We did want to include it, mostly just as a reminder that the provincial government does set the legislation and the policies that MPAC uses to assess properties. And often when there's tax policy issues or changes to the way that MPAC assesses properties, that also falls under the jurisdiction of the provincial government. As I mentioned, MPAC assesses and classifies all properties in accordance with the Assessment Act and associated legislation. And property owners who have questions or concerns about their assessment are certainly encouraged to contact MPAC. Municipalities would be working with our assessment values to determine property taxes, and property owners with questions or concerns about specifically their taxes would be encouraged to contact the municipality. The next slide is in regards to the next province-wide assessment update. And as part of the Ontario government's spring budget, the Minister of Finance announced the decision to postpone a province-wide assessment update, once again due to the pandemic. So what this means is that property assessments for the 2022 taxation year will continue to be based on the fully phased-in assessment values with our legislated valuation date, which is January 1, 2016. In the budget, it also noted that there will be consultations on the timing for the next assessment update, what the next valuation date will be, and what that assessment update will look like. And those consultations should be commencing shortly, and the outcomes of those will be communicated in the fall. So although there is no assessment update, our work does continue. And as the next slide is stating, our evaluation date, as I mentioned, is January 1, 2016. So any of the changes that we're making to the property, any of the work that we're doing, whether it be with building permits, whether we're doing reviews, inquiries from property owners, etc., all of that information is still based on January 1, 2016. Essentially, every property does continue to be valued at that same point in time until such time as the government advises when the next assessment update will be and when our next valuation date will be. The next slide, we shared the 2020 Municipal Partnerships Report, and it highlights a lot of the work that we've done over the past year to support our municipalities. And one of the things that municipalities indicated at the beginning was that you wanted MPAC to keep that business going with minimal disruption to services, continue to capture new assessments. And so we really did look to new and different ways to capture the information that we required. In the fall, we took an additional 2 weeks to capture as much new assessment as we were able to prior to delivering those assessment rolls to municipalities in December. The next slide speaks to our 2020 annual report, and this was just released a couple of weeks ago. So if you've not had an opportunity to do so, it is available on our website. And again, it highlights a number of the changes that we made to the work that we're doing in support of our municipalities. And so it really focuses on some of the highlights of how we responded to the pandemic, et cetera. The next slide is speaking specifically to some of the new ways that we worked in collaboration with our municipal partners. And we really had to find ways to work differently. One of the things we were able to do is we developed a platform within Municipal Connect, which allowed municipalities to automatically submit electronic building permit plans to us. And to date, we've received over 300 plans from municipalities across Elgin County. And that allowed us to capture over 100 million in new assessment for all of the municipalities in Elgin County last year. And the other nice thing, the other nice metric that we capture is how much of that new assessment is within 1 year of occupancy. So ideally, we're capturing new assessment within 1 year. And it was 91% last year. So we certainly appreciate the support from all of our municipalities in working with our staff to ensure that we're able to get the information that we require. Just highlighting our role in the building permit process. As you may be aware, municipalities provide MPAC with their monthly building permit submissions. So the building permits are sent to us every month and are uploaded into our system. And as well, we are provided with occupancy dates, with final dates, so that we're really able to manage that workload and know when those properties are complete and ready to be assessed. And again, with your support and receiving the building permit plans, we've been able to continue to do so. Currently, right now, we follow the provincial COVID framework, and because we are currently in the gray restrict lockdown, that means that all of our field work is presently paused. So that's why it's very important that we're relying on those electronic submissions as an example. Sharing with you on the next slide, this is the assessment base for the County of Elgin. And this is actually based on the 2021 taxation year. So this is just to give you an idea in terms of your overall assessment base and how that's broken down between the different classes. And again, this is based on the 2021 taxation year. So essentially, approximately 53% of your properties are falling into residential, and next would be farm properties at 37%. So this time I'd like to turn things over to my new regional manager, Ann Haynes, to wrap up the presentation for you.
Great. Thanks so much, Brenda. And thank you, Mr. Warden and Council, for having us here this morning for our quick update. Glad that we highlighted the partnership and the annual report, which I hope you've all seen. I just want to introduce myself as the new regional manager. I'm coming from Parry Sound, Muskoka into Southwest Ontario. So on the map, I come from Zone 5 and now moving into Zone 1. And I'm excited to work with Brenda, Judy, and the whole MNSR team in Zone 1, supporting our municipalities and our stakeholders. So I just wanted to quickly say, again, excited to be here. Any questions that you guys might have, we are open to that. And I also want to just remind you that even though Brenda mentioned our offices are closed, we are continuing to work. And you saw that work through the building plans and turning the permits and the plans into revenue and assessments timely for you and for property owners. And so I would encourage you, if you haven't connected with us through our monthly webinars or our In Touch newsletters or these various reports and reaching out to do so. We are your one-stop shop as your representatives of MPAC, and that's why we're glad to be here today. And so at this time, I just want to say thanks again, and I hope everyone's staying safe and well during COVID, and have a great day.
Well, thank you, ladies, Brenda and Ann. I'm going to open the floor if there's any questions from our council members. Deputy Warden Mennel, go ahead.
Mr. Warden?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. I guess this is either to Ann or Brenda. I'm expecting that there's going to be a significant shift away from farmland, industrial, commercial onto residential, just based on what I've seen in the last few years on housing prices. Now, 2022 is still going to be based on 2016. So I'm guessing 2023 will be on the 2020 assessment base. Is that correct?
So I can jump in. Thank you for the question. So at this point, we know the information for the 2022 taxation year, and we actually don't know anything beyond that. So once the Minister of Finance advises us later in the fall what the next valuation date will be, they will also set the parameters for what taxation years that will apply to, and sort of what that assessment update will look like. So at this point, we don't know beyond 2022.
Because traditionally if there's a significant change in your assessment, you're given a 4-year gap to make that adjustment. If we don't do anything until 2023, that only leaves 2 years to do that. So I'm assuming that there's going to be significant impact on residential in 2023 and 2024.
I'll just jump in on that a little bit,
Sure.
Brenda. So thanks for the comment and question. A couple things. So you're correct. There's generally a 4-year cycle. So we give property owners, the legislation dictates they have 4 years, and we phase in that new assessment, moving from one market to the next. So one of the changes that happened in the fall budget and when last year when they paused the first assessment update, moving to the 2019 valuations, was they also made some changes where they could alter potentially the cycle. So we don't know, to Brenda's point, if and what that cycle will be, and we do not know if and what the base year valuation will be until that has been set. So just so you're not thinking that we'll be moving continually into, we've lost 2 years of the 4-year cycle and they only have 2 years, that's not necessarily maybe the case, but again, we have to await direction from finance on this. And that 4-year cycle that we were moving toward was to take place for the 20 21, 22, 23, 24, I believe, taxation years. And so that would have been as of Jan 1, 2019, but that has all been put on hold and paused until the province consults with municipalities, gets the feedback, reviews the market, et cetera, and then decides how they're going to make that regulation or that legislation change.
Okay, thank you, ladies.
Further questions, comments?
Mr. Warden, it's Grant.
Go ahead.
So with a new house that's just been built and so when it's assessed, it's at current market value today. So if homes that are been held at the 216 rate, and so it's installed for 2 years. So at some point, there's going to be a catch up. So the new homes are carrying a little bit more than an older home in assessment based on market value. So is there going to be an adjustment at some point with the old homes and the newer homes to bring them back in line with the assessment? It's hard to, I'm having a hard time getting across what I'm asking.
It is a tough one to get your head wrapped around, but just if I could jump in and clarify. So everyone in the province has a valuation date as of Jan 1, 2016. So even though it's a new home and it's built in 2020 or 2021 or 2019, we still have to assess them. If they were around in 2016, what would that home have been worth? So based on what's sitting there today, what would have been worth in 2016? So we actually backdate everyone. And because of the phase-in, we not only have to say what would they be worth in 2016, but what would they be worth in 2012 as well. And then if there was any phase-in implications, that's how it would work, right? So everyone's still apples to apples, everyone's still Jan 1, 2016. It's just that we do have the authority when new construction takes place to pick that up and assess that based on the permit and the information and whatever they construct on the site. We are allowed and we have the authority to continue even outside of an assessment update to pick up what we call new assessment. So, but that new assessment is not as of today. It is backdated as to Jan 1, 2016.
Thank you.
Further comments? Councillor McPhail, go ahead. I believe you're on mute.
Quite timely we're having this discussion. As I call it, assessment is the elephant in the room. And you know, we work very hard every year on a budget to come in at, hopefully around a 2% increase. But what I'm finding, and is being demonstrated by other residents in my community, that when you take the most important part of the year-over-year tax bill and compare it, and I have done this myself on my own properties, compare it with the amount of money that was paid first installment last year and the amount of money that was paid first installment this year. And let's not confuse ourselves with percentages and all that other things that go along with it that we tell the public. The real actual cost increase in dollars and cents in my own property was 8.5% increase year over year. And I have other people that are showing me the same information. So I think that, almost 10% increases across the board every year. Really, I don't know how sustainable that is with our residents. And I think as a council, we have to be certainly on guard, knowing what the end cost is going to be to our residents and try to mitigate that through either tax rate or some other mechanism to not use this assessment that has been going along, and certainly the one that we know is coming in the future here that's going to be probably quite an increase. I think that we have to be vigilant to balance that off and ensure that we're not using assessment just as a cash cow for the municipality to increase its coffers. So I think it beholds this council to be certainly on guard for that. And I would suggest that each and every one of you go home and take your year-over-year tax bills and just see what they have been doing over the last number of years, because it's certainly something that concerns me.
Thank you, Duncan. Anyone care to comment on that? All right. Further comments, or are we finished? Julie, we have apologize here. I'm looking, I think I counted 21 people I'm trying to keep track of. So if I'm a little slow, cut me a little slack, please. Do you have a resolution prepared?
Sure, be it resolved that the presentation from MPAC be received for information.
All right. I see Councillor Ketchabah and Councillor Purcell. Any further questions, comments? Please call the vote.
Deputy Warden Mennel,
Yes.
Councillor McPhail,
Yes.
Councillor Purcell,
Yes.
Councillor Martin,
Yes.
Councillor Jones,
Yes.
Councillor French,
Yes.
Councillor Jiguer,
Yes.
Councillor Ketchbaugh,
Yes.
Mr. Warden,
Yes,
9-0, the motion is carried.
thank you. Now, Brenda and Ann, thank you for the presentation. I think we all get this. It's a pretty difficult time to be doing business. Certainly we know it. So I wish you all the best in the future. Thank you for the presentation. Stay safe. Have a good
Thank
day.
you very much. Take care.
We're at the place to a motion to move into committee of the whole, please. McPhail and French. Please call the vote.
Deputy Warden Mennel,
Yes.
Councillor McPhail,
Yes.
Councillor Purcell,
Yes.
Councillor Martin,
Yes.
Councillor Jones,
Yes.
Councillor French,
Yes.
Councillor Jiguer,
Yes.
Councillor Ketchbaugh,
Yes.
Mr. Warden,
Yes.
9-0, the motion is carried.
All right, before we have our first report, I just want to make sure everyone, I'm trying here to make sure I see everyone. So if I miss someone, please speak up. It's like I said earlier, just kind of holding their breath that someone doesn't come to the door or the cat gets loose, things like that. But please jump in, and if I miss you, and I think it's important that we're in some pretty stressful times. So if I have any suggestion, let's try and be kind to each other. I know myself, and I've talked to some of the councilors, we've had a lot of concerns expressed by some ratepayers. The stress level for community is rising. But let's remind ourselves today to try and be kind and lead by that. But first report, I think it's Michelle. Am I
Thank you,
correct?
Mr. Warden. Yes, through
Good
to
morning.
you. Good morning. Through you to members of council. My first report is on the Homes Nursing Policy Manual Review and Revisions. So again, policy and procedure manuals ensure consistency, and they are to be reviewed annually, and they must align with best practice and legislative guidelines. So the Homes Nursing Policy Manual has been reviewed and revised by the managers of the resident care for the 3 County of Elgin homes and myself in consultation with public health. The revisions are included in the report, and the 2 recommendations before you are that the report be received and filed, and that the policy manual review and revisions be approved by council. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Michelle. Seems fairly straightforward. Any questions for Michelle? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Moved by Deputy Warden Mennel, second by,
Sally.
thank you, Sally. Please call the vote.
Deputy Warden Mennel,
Yes.
Councillor McPhail,
Yes.
Councillor Purcell,
Yes.
Councillor Martin,
Yes.
Councillor Jones,
Yes.
Councillor French,
Yes.
Councillor Jiguer,
Yes.
Councillor Ketchbaugh,
Yes.
Mr. Warden,
Yes.
9-0, the motion is carried.
Thank you. Michelle, you're still up.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. The second report is the Homes Infection Prevention and Control Manual Review and Revisions. The same information must be reviewed annually and aligned with best practice and legislative guidelines. So the Infection Prevention and Control Manual has been reviewed by the management team of the 3 homes and myself in consultation with Public Health as well. This year we had an infection prevention and control consultant participate in review of a number of the policies, and they are outlined before you, but the majority of changes for this policy are updates to align with best practice for pandemic. So our point of care risk assessment was a big piece, screening, testing, and the types of precautions that are required. There's one new policy and procedure around universal masking that's included in this report. The 2 recommendations before you are that the report be received and filed and that council approve the manual review and revisions. And again, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Michelle. Questions for Michelle? Comments? Councillor Jiguer, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Through you to Michelle. It's a lot of updates for staff to keep up with. So I'm curious, what's the mechanism for constantly updating and training staff? Like how much time is there in their already busy schedule? I can only imagine.
So after today's report to council and the approval of the policy manual, the updates will go to the management team at the 3 homes. Changes have already been discussed at a number of departmental meetings about opportunities for improvement. So a lot of the changes come from the frontline staff, but any major changes, if they're minor wording, then that's not something that needs to go on our Surge Learning Education program, but anything that's a significant change will be added to the Surge Learning program, and staff will have a month unless it's an immediate need. So that, for example, the universal masking for residents policy, that's one that we'll do some work on. Some assessments need to be done for the residents and some education for the registered staff and all departmental staff on that piece. So that'll be probably a 2-week implementation process at each of the homes to implement that further. Does that answer
Further
your question?
questions? I think so. I think I've seen the head nod. So further questions for Michelle? If not, entertain a motion. Moved by Jones, second by French. Please call the vote.
Deputy Warden Mennel,
Yes.
Councillor McPhail,
Yes.
Councillor Purcell,
Yes.
Councillor Martin,
Yes.
Councillor Jones,
Yes.
Councillor French,
Yes.
Councillor Jiguer, Councillor Ketchabah,
Yes.
Mr. Warden.
Yes,
9-0, the motion is carried.
thank you for that. Move on to manager of planning, final plan of subdivision, Kokomo Beach, phase 2. Nancy?
Good morning, everyone.
morning.
Through you, Mr. Warden, to members of council. This is a report on the registration of Kokomo Beach Phase 2 in Port Stanley. Pretty self-explanatory, so I'm available for any questions.
Questions? If not, certainly some people excited with this down in Port, not all, but it is moving along. Looking for a mover and seconder.
So moved.
Deputy Warden Mennel and Jones. Call the vote, please.
Deputy Warden Mennel,
Yes.
Councillor McPhail,
Yes.
Councillor Purcell,
Yes.
Councillor Martin,
Yes.
Councillor Jones,
Yes.
Councillor French,
Yes.
Councillor Jiguer,
Yes.
Councillor Ketchabah,
Yes.
Mr. Warden.
Yes,
9-0, the motion is carried.
thank you. Manager of planning agreement with Terranet, County of Elgin registered and deposited plan images.
Thank you. Oh,
Oh,
sorry.
go ahead. Go ahead,
Through you-
Nancy.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Warden, to members of council. This is a report on the agreement with Terranet to purchase the County of Elgin registered and deposited plan images and asking for authorization to execute that agreement. This was something that was encompassed in the planning budget for 2021, and I'm available for any questions anyone has.
Questions, comments for Nancy? Not hearing any. Mover and sec. Oh, Ed, are you moving it? Or is it a
I will
question?
move it, but I have a question first.
Go ahead.
Through you to Nancy. Nancy, it's, and I agree, it was approved in the budget. Can you remind us what the budgeted amount was for this?
Through you, Mr. Warden, to Ketchaba, I believe it was $20,000, so I'm just over that budget. I'd have to recheck. I'm sorry. I didn't check before the meeting.
Councillor Purcell. Question?
I'm just willing to second the motion.
All right. You're still willing to move that, Ed? Okay, moved by Ketchaba, Purcell. Please call the question.
Deputy Warden Mennel,
Yes.
Councillor McPhail,
Yes.
Councillor Purcell,
Yes.
Councillor Martin,
Yes.
Councillor Jones,
Yes.
Councillor French,
Yes.
Councillor Jiguer,
Yes.
Councillor Ketchba,
Yes.
Mr. Warden,
Yes,
9-0, the motion is carried.
thank you. Senior financial analyst, council and outside boards remuneration and expenses. I believe this was deferred. There was some couple of discrepancy. I'm hoping everyone's satisfied with the numbers now.
Yeah.
Who's going to speak to that?
I could speak. Do you need me to go over the things that were corrected?
Not unless someone has a question, but I'll open up to the council. Are you satisfied? Ketchaba, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Warden. I want to thank staff for the providing the clarifications. And thank you for your patience on that. I will move the report.
All right, thank you for that. Do we have a seconder? McPhail. No further discussion, please call the vote.
Deputy Warden Mennel,
Yes.
Councillor McPhail,
Yes.
Councillor Purcell,
Yes.
Councillor Martin,
Yes.
Councillor Jones,
Yes.
Councillor French,
Yes.
Councillor Jiguer,
Yes.
Councillor Ketchba,
Yes.
Mr. Warden,
Yes,
9-0, the motion is carried.
all right, thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, thanks very much. I'm glad it passed this time easily, so. Item 6 is Director of Financial Services and King George Lift Bridge debenture.
Thank you,
Jim.
Mr. Warden.
Good morning.
With the budget that we just approved, we had a plan for $44 million of debentures. That included $12 million in our first debenture installment, which was in two phases. The first phase we took in November, and the second $6 million is part of this debenture here today. The November debenture we received at a rate of 1.43%. And the available rate today is 2.04%. So it's going to cost us about another $20,000 higher than in interest this year than the first debenture because of the change in interest rate. But still, I think most of you would agree that 2% is still far below anything that we would have expected in the past from what we're used to normally in interest rates. We'll receive this money on May the 3rd. It'll be when it's all finalized. There's a bylaw before you today for approval, and then through 2025, we'll be coming forward as those years progress with another $33 million of debentures that'll be issued to support the Terrace Lodge program. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Questions for Jim? A lot of unhappy people if we don't pay the bridge off and open it down in port. Everyone satisfied with the report? Entertain a motion to approve. Purcell and Jiguer, thank you. Please call the vote.
Deputy Warden Mennel, Councillor McPhail,
Yes.
Councillor Purcell,
Yes.
Councillor Martin,
Yes.
Councillor Jones,
Yes.
Councillor French,
Yes.
Councillor Jiguer,
Yes.
Councillor Ketchba,
Yes.
Mr. Warden,
Yes,
9-0, the motion is carried.
thank you for that. We'll move on to Director of Human Resources, 2021 Employee Benefit Plan Renewal. Good morning, Amy.
Good morning, Mr. Warden and members of County Council. So early this year, we did review the projected 2021 benefit renewal with our benefits consultant, Mosey & Mosey. At that time, it was anticipated we would see an 11% increase in 2021. Through negotiations, our consultant was able to reduce the overall increase amount to 6.1% for 2021. This increase is largely related to our extended healthcare premiums, which are directly tied to usage and claims experience. Extended healthcare makes up about 70% of our total benefits plan costs. As discussed with Council in 2020, HR is focused on implementing cost control measures with hopes to flatten these increases in the future. These measures include implementing disability management and return to work best practices, employee wellness initiatives, organizational culture improvement, collective bargaining, and plan design. Offering of the employee assistance plan through Homewood in 2020 has provided staff with access to key wellness resources, and usage has been strong since implementation in 2020. So it's good to see staff are making use of those resources, especially during the challenging last year that we've had. So the county did receive some COVID-related premium credits in 2020 from Manulife, which were recommended to be utilized toward future premium costs. Last year's marketing did avoid significant cost impacts for 2020, 2021, and through to 2023, with LTD and life premiums frozen or capped for a period of time. And the county is not alone in experiencing escalating benefit and other insurance costs. It's unfortunately the experience across the majority, if not all, neighboring employers. And I'm happy to answer any questions that council might have.
Amy, questions, comments from council? Not seeing any. Mover and seconder, please. Jones and Deputy Warden Mennel. Please call the vote.
Deputy Warden Mennel.
Yes.
Councillor Sale. Councillor Purcell.
Yes.
Councillor Martin.
Yes.
Councillor Jones.
Yes.
Councillor French.
Yes.
Councillor Jiguer.
Yes.
Councillor Ketchba.
Yes.
Mr. Warden.
Yes.
9-0, the motion is carried.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you.
Next is we have our county solicitor amendments to our Woodlands conservation bylaw. Morning, Steve.
Morning. Through you to council, before you is what I would describe as a self-explanatory report detailing proposed housekeeping amendments to the Woodlands conservation bylaw as had been directed by council on October 13th of last year. The report is presented today to allow council an opportunity to ask questions regarding any of the proposed amendments with a view to consideration of enactment of the amending bylaw at the meeting on May 11th, 2021. Before taking any questions, I have one general comment and two specific comments with respect to the bylaw. Firstly, on a general basis, I'd emphasize again that the proposed bylaw is, as I described, it's simply addressing housekeeping revisions. These revisions have been noted, I suppose, over the years, particularly when I was prosecuting charges laid pursuant to the bylaw. You notice some of these things, or you notice deficiencies or improvements that can be made. More specifically, I do draw your attention to two specific amendments. Firstly, section 1.14 of the amending bylaw. That amends section 5 of the Woodlands conservation bylaw. Essentially, it revises and details the process by which applications are received and processed by the tree commissioner establishing more realistic timeframes and creating an appeal process to council to replace the long ago deleted appeal to the Ontario Municipal Board. The appeal process as proposed mirrors that established in respect of council exemptions.
I got Michelle's message.
Section 1.16 and 1.17 relate to an increase in the fines. Under the Municipal Act, the maximum fine for an individual offense is $100,000. The amending bylaw proposes an increase in fines for a first offense from $10,000 to $50,000 per offense. And I've made that proposal to allow for more appropriate monetary penalties in the event of clearing offenses where the total number of trees cannot be determined. So the total number of trees destroyed or cleared. Similarly, the fine for second or subsequent offenses is proposed to be increased to the maximum amount. Again, these are maximum penalties, not set penalties. But again, it addresses a situation in which there may be extensive clearing, but there can't be a account of the number of trees involved. So that's my general comment and my specific reference to two of the items, but I'd be more than happy to take any questions regarding the approach or any of the specific amendments being proposed.
Thank you, Steve. Anyone have a comment or question of Steve? Go ahead, Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Warden. Through you to Steve. Is this going to help with success in our attempts to have when we have a violator, trees replaced? Are you going to be able to be more successful as far as going through the courts? Is it still going to be a challenge for you? And when we look at somebody that's violated and cleared 2 or 3 acres, whatever it is that might be, sometimes they've been able to place trees elsewhere. Really, if somebody's gone to the effort to remove trees purposely without a permit, realistically, those trees should go back on the same site. Has that been accounted for, Steve?
Those are matters that are not necessarily addressed specifically in the bylaw, and I wouldn't expect them to be specifically addressed. Dealing with the second question first, there are occasions when trees are where reforestation is provided on parcels other than the cleared parcel for specific reasons. The general approach is that it should be that the reforestation should be on that particular property that was cleared. There have been circumstances in the past in which a reforestation order has been requested and granted in respect of different lands where there are reasons why that reforestation in that particular area is inappropriate. The circumstance that I recall and we come across from time to time is where drainage work has been improved at the local level in the area where reforestation is where reforestation would normally be provided for. And my view in those circumstances is there is, given that there's an exemption for removal of trees in respect of drainage works, I don't want to put I don't want to have the reforestation occur in that area if it risks that the trees are going to be removed prior to reaching maturity. We've also addressed or come across situations where the where the proposed reforestation area was also involved in conservation authority works and prosecution. And so a decision was made at that time that we would seek reforestation elsewhere. The primary position is to require reforestation in the cleared area, but there may be circumstances in which that's not prudent. And so as the prosecutor, I exercise some discretion to provide for reforestation elsewhere. I do try to keep the reforestation, if it is to be moved to a different area, I try to keep it within the same local municipality in order that the tree cover is maintained within that local municipality. That was the first one, and I've already forgotten or that was the second question. I've already forgotten the first one.
Is it going to make it easier for you to litigate?
Well, it's never easy to litigate. We have experienced a great deal of success with respect to charges that are laid. So I don't see this as making it easier or harder to litigate. I think it's the same. These are improvements that simply have been noticed, whether or not it's words being misspelled, whether or not it's it may involve just consistency of language that have caused me concern. For instance, rather than woodlands, sometimes there was reference to a woodlot or to a forest. Well, I don't want woodlot and forest in there. I want woodlands consistently throughout. So it's things like that. So I don't think it changes the merits or strengths or weaknesses of litigation. Each case, quite frankly, depends upon the facts and the evidence that's available. I know I will acknowledge that sometimes there is frustration with respect to trees that have been harvested, but unless we have evidence as to who, when, we don't. Just because I see trees just because Jeff may see trees on the ground, that doesn't mean that a prosecution can be supported. And as an officer of the court, it's my obligation not to bring forth cases that have no reasonable prospect of conviction. And if I don't have a who or a when, I don't have a case. So.
Thank you.
Further comments?
Mr. Warden, it's Sally.
Go ahead.
Yes, and part of that is for Steve, so I'll ask that one first. And that is the frustration we've had with this bylaw that we added, the one for Central Elgin, cutting trees on steep slopes. And last August, early September, we had quite a few trees cut on Front Street, just below Front Street or below, above First Street. And it was reported, and I know that Mr. Lawrence came down and he met with us and he looked at it, and he could see the trees that were felled, and he was going to try and find out who did it. All the neighbors know exactly who did it, but nobody was willing to testify because it was based on the fact that he said he wanted those trees out of there for his view. And that's exactly why we put the bylaw in, so people couldn't cut them just for view, because it is dangerous to the slope. And Mr. Lawrence even said he cut them and dropped the trees even the wrong way which would create erosion. And then now he says, of course, it's over 6 months since it occurred, so there's nothing can be done. How do we go about preventing this sort of problem that has just occurred? Otherwise, our bylaw is useless.
Well, with all due respect, the bylaw is not useless. The bylaw creates the offense, it creates the penalties. The legislation creates the secondary the secondary penalties, such as reforestation orders and probation orders. But one of the basic difficulties with any prosecution, whether or not it's a murder charge in criminal courts or a bylaw charge in provincial offenses court, is the requirement of evidence. And if it's fine for people to complain, but unless they come forward and are prepared to testify or prepared to provide some sort of other evidence, whether or not it's a video or a photograph or this type of thing, there is no case to be made. There's no case to be presented to the court. So this is not, with all due respect, I don't view this as a weakness or a deficiency in the bylaw. The bylaw has withstood challenges since 2003, since it was enacted. There are situations, and I've had it. I'm familiar with the case that you're referencing. I've had situations when I was still in private practice and prosecuting in London. We had the same problem. If there is no evidence, and it's a matter of evidence when it comes to enforcement. If there's no evidence, then there's not a case to be made. I sympathize with the neighbors. I sympathize with counselors. I sympathize with Mr. Lawrence. But from my perspective as the lead prosecutor on these types of cases, I have an obligation to the courts not to bring forward cases that there is not admissible evidence that can be relied upon. And that's the unfortunate situation with the circumstance you're referring to. So I understand the frustration. I understand the frustration, but with all due respect, it's not the bylaw.
Thank you. Further, Mr. Warden, I wanted to ask Jeff Lawrence a question. If Jeff's on.
I don't see Jeff.
I don't see Jeff.
Okay, it was just a question concerning the endangered trees. Gibson can even speak to it, but it lists the circumference measurements at different heights, but it lists trees like, butternut and American chestnut, which my understanding was they can't be cut at all. So I'm not quite certain why those measurements at certain heights are in there. Those types of trees, these endangered trees.
I would have to take that one under advisement. I can certainly speak to Mr. Lawrence and come back to you. That's beyond my technical expertise, but it's a valid question, and I'll get you an answer.
Thank you.
Do we need to defer this report till we get that answer, or conditional, or what do you think, Julie?
I think it's at the discretion of council. We're happy to do either.
Councilor Purcell?
Mr. Warden, I'm happy to move the report and the updates as long as as Steve undertakes to make sure that that part of it is correct.
If I can, it's proposed that the amending bylaw not be enacted until May 11th, and I did that in case that there was any further questions that might come up, any whether or not from councillors or even from ratepayers. But I can certainly provide that the answer prior to May 11th through correspondence.
So are you
Fine with
suggesting
me.
we just, go ahead, Sally.
I'm quite happy to second the motion to pass to be adopted on May the 11th, the one that Mr. Gibson recommended.
Are we clear on that, everyone? And I would like to speak to Mr. Gibson's, with the tree slope, without evidence, that'd be just wasting taxpayers' money. The residents that are doing the complaining have to kind of step up. It's unfortunate and it is frustrating, but without the evidence, we're going nowhere, spinning our tires. Who had a hand up? Councillor McPhail. You are muted.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. I certainly support our solicitor in his position on this. But I think that listening to what he's saying there, that I think that should we consider, and I know this is outside of the actual tree bylaw, but should there be some consideration from the county's side of it that early intervention is probably something that if we can find a mechanism to do that, certainly might help gather evidence that our solicitor needs to prosecute these infractions. Certainly a lot, and I think the large majority of our landlords get permits to do the work on their properties, but of course there's always those that do fall through the cracks. And I think everybody knows that we have one tree inspector for the whole of the county. And if you had the opportunity to drive across the county, which I think everybody has, that is a big area to cover. So I'm just wondering, is it something that the county should consider maybe through Julie and her meeting with the local CAOs to see if there's an appetite that each one of our respective municipalities has road patrols that travel up and down our roads, and certainly if they were willing to work with the county, that if they see something that's that doesn't seem just right, piles of logs that don't have the appropriate signage out front saying that it's a permitted logging site, that the lower tier municipalities can relay that message back through to our tree inspector to be able to go and investigate those sites to make sure that everything is as it should be. Otherwise, I don't know how we expect one man to cover all of the county. Just a thought.
Certainly sounds like a good idea. Better communications. Grant, your hand's up. Go ahead.
I do agree with Councilor McPhail on that. I guess one problem I see is I know in my area that a lot of times these trees fall down on the weekend when we don't have patrols out. And unfortunately, it's by the time Monday comes around or Tuesday when the patrol goes down that road, the evidence is gone. It's been burnt by the time somebody rolls by. And I'm not sure how you fix that situation. Obviously, if neighbors call in is the best solution, but a lot of times neighbors are reluctant to do that as well. So I do agree that we need to help Jeff out as best we can. Weekends seem to be a bigger issue where we don't have manpower out on the roads.
Steve, you got a comment?
Sure. And I think that would be a great idea if something could be established. I would also comment that it is not always the case that the roads crew or a member of the roads crew would necessarily have to testify. It depends upon what other evidence could be garnered, presumably based upon a subsequent attendance by the tree commissioner. My experience with Jeff is that he is very very quick to respond to allegations or concerns regarding violations, and his observations can then become the primary observations. The issue is often, we can usually then establish a when. The concern is usually then the who. That's the biggest concern. But there may be applications that have been presented, and that's where I had that in mind when I was preparing the process change in section 5 that would provide a more relevant time period that would allow for Jeff to review and to establish conditions if necessary. So but overall, I would say that that's an excellent idea for if there can be that form of cooperation.
Councillor McPhail.
That's just building on Grant's comments there. Does the County of Elgin, taking into consideration that we have one employee responsible for this bylaw, is there an on-call person to fill in for Jeff on weekends or holidays or times when chainsaws come out and hopefully they're thinking that there's nobody around? Is there someone that we have available to make sure that those weekends are covered?
Julie?
Through you, Mr. Warden, to Councillor McPhail, yes, our backup is the Middlesex County Tree Commissioner.
Okay. He's willing to come out on weekends and work on behalf of Elgin County.
Yes. And vice versa.
Just as a point of clarification, if I can, and just so everyone is clear, when Councillor McPhail refers to the tree commissioner as an employee of Elgin County, he is not an employee of Elgin County. He is an employee of the Conservation Authority, and it's pursuant to a contract, and he serves not only as the tree commissioner, but also as the weed inspector. So and as well as his responsibilities in his position with the Conservation Authority. So it's actually, he's spread even thinner than just being one employee. He's a contract employee with other responsibilities.
Go ahead, Duncan.
Well, which begs the question, is that sufficient for our needs at Elgin County, or should we be investigating an alternative?
One would presume that if there were more people, more boots on the ground, that there would be a greater opportunity for observation of violations. If that is the approach that that council wishes to take, I'm sensitive to the discussion in October, wherein there was a desire to consider, I think, other regimes or other methods of enforcement. I think that this is the primary method of enforcement, but there was a desire, I think, on behalf of council to potentially consider other methods or regimes. But more boots on the ground, I think, would normally transfer or normally translate into a greater chance of observation of violation.
Councillor Jiguer.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. This is something, sorry, I don't know where to begin, but I just want to be very, very careful about walking down the path of more boots on the ground. At the time of designing a bylaw, we have to do diligence. We have to do our due diligence that we have the capacity to implement the bylaw consistently and fairly across the county. And to, like, in hindsight, trying to add more boots on the ground, which I could only presume would be more resources. I would not be in favor of that. I think the better, so two things. A, we should be reviewing, and as I suggested before, and reviewing this more comprehensively to see what is the better method if it's not a bylaw. And as far as the bylaw itself, I think we need to do it through a, community education so that we do it as a shared responsibility and we don't start tagging different employees of our municipalities on being on patrol. And because then what else are we going to ask them to do? We had this when we talked about ATVs and we said we don't have the capacity, and so we're going to have to do it based on complaints. We have this, I could go on the number of bylaws that we don't have actually the full capacity to patrol. So I'm not in favor of going down the path of tagging employees who already have a set of responsibilities and starting to ask them to patrol different bylaws.
Further comments? I agree with Councillor McPhail's comments that we are spread quite thin. I'm just thinking, if our tree commissioner had an invitation to a wedding in Good Times in Kingston, lo and behold, the tree commissioner from Middlesex went to the same wedding. Who's looking after Middlesex and Elgin County? Councillor Jones.
I guess maybe before we jump to conclusions, maybe it's a discussion that needs to be had with Jeff and how much time he is given to do these duties. Obviously, he has other duties with the Conservation Authority as well. So maybe it's a matter of a discussion as to is it a matter of the county needs to step up and pay for a few more hours a week or whatever it is, just to see where the Conservation Authority and Jeff are coming from with this as well. So we have a full picture of what's the number of hours that he's putting in per week for us. Maybe Julie already knows.
Councillor McPhail.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Certainly from my perspective, I'm not looking for any solutions to anything here today. I think that change always begins with conversation, and you need to have the conversation, and then people need to think about where we're at and where we need to go. Certainly back to Councillor Jaguar's situation about complaints, and I'll take ATVs for a prime example. I'm really long on complaints when it comes to ATVs, but I'm really short on enforcement, and I really don't know what to tell people other than continue calling the police. And when that's the only tool I have in my toolbox, it makes it pretty disheartening for those people that call on a weekly basis over ATVs. But certainly not looking for a solution, but I think the conversation needs to start. And if there's a better way of doing business, let's talk it over the next little while and see if we can come up with something that will work better.
All right, I think it's been a good discussion. I believe we have a mover and a seconder. Are there any further comments, or are we ready to vote on this? Julie?
I would just add that in addition to receiving and filing the report and deferring the enactment of the bylaw to the May 11th meeting, I would add that the CAO be directed to provide a follow-up report that addresses council's feedback today.
That's fine with the mover and seconder. Seen heads nodding, so.
Fine with me.
Okay, I think we're ready for the vote, Julie.
Deputy Warden Mennel.
Yes.
Councillor McPhail.
Yes.
Councillor Purcell.
Yes.
Councillor Martin.
Yes.
Councillor Jones.
Yes.
Councillor French.
Yes.
Councillor Jaguar.
Yes.
Counselor Ketchba,
Yes.
Mr. Warden,
Yes,
9-0, the motion is carried.
thank you. Review of draft telecommunication equipment consent and road user agreement. Steve, you're still here. Go up.
I'm still up. Thank you, Mr. Warden, through you to council. This is again a follow-up report to direction received March 23rd of this year to prepare and implement for use a specialized telecommunication equipment consent and road user agreement with respect to telecommunication installations proposed for county road allowances. The report highlights the critical elements of the draft agreement, and the draft agreement is attached for, and I'm available for any questions.
Comments? Questions? All right. Councillor Jiguer?
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Just a clarification, I noticed in the communication requirements section, it talks about sharing this agreement with the connectivity committee and with installing companies. So just wanted to clarify the process. So if those two bodies have feedback or have comments, how does that affect if we approve it today at the council?
Steve?
I suppose that if there were revisions that council wanted to consider, then we would have to follow up with an amending agreement. Whether or not it's next week, next month, or next year, that would be the process.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. So my understanding is that it would be more expedient and useful to have one in place right now. And then we can always come back if we do receive feedback. Would that be correct to assume?
I think that it was the agreement was prepared on that basis in response to inquiries from installation companies. It was the issue was reviewed by staff and felt to be a program worthy of implementation to streamline the system for these types of projects, and to avoid, I guess, a more formal process that necessitated under the formal road user agreement that necessitated frequent amendments for each particular project. That's not going to be required under this regime. So the short answer is yes.
Okay.
I'm falling back to when I was in private practice and got paid by the word.
Further comments for Steve? All right, I'll entertain a motion. Mover and seconder, please. Jiguer, Mennel. Julie, please call the vote.
Deputy Warden Mennel.
Yes.
Councillor McPhail.
Yes.
Councillor Purcell.
Yes.
Councillor Martin.
Yes.
Councillor Jones.
Yes.
Councillor French.
Yes.
Councillor Jiguer.
Yes.
Councillor Ketchba.
Yes.
Mr. Warden,
Yes,
9-0, the motion is carried.
thank you. General Manager of Engineering, Planning and Enterprise, Port Stanley temporary traffic signals. Brian, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Good morning, through you to County Council. This report is in response to a request from the municipality of Central Elgin to permanently retain the traffic signals temporarily installed at the intersection of Warren and Colburn, as well as Warren and Carlow roads, as part of the county's ongoing King George Lift Bridge rehabilitation project. As presented and passed before council, and as part of the detailed design, Dillon Consulting was retained and completed a review of traffic operations that concluded that signals were only warranted in accordance with the Ontario Traffic Manual to address increased vehicular volumes for summer long weekend conditions during a period of time with which the bridge was closed, and that the pre-existing always stop sign intersection control be reinstated. Now, while staff's recommendation before you recommends continued monitoring associated with the impact of development affecting these two intersection locations and planning for timely installation of signals at the appropriate time in future. Staff certainly welcomes Council's direction and further notes that there does exist available unspent project funds to purchase and make permanent the temporary signals should Council wish to do so. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Brian, if I may, this request come from a member of Central Elgin Council. I guess my question to you would be, have you had a formal discussion with staff at Central Elgin?
I have, yes. Central Elgin staff is certainly well aware of Dylan's findings, the outcome and the intent, the original intent of these signals. So I've also had discussions in recent past with the ward council member as it pertains to this request as well, and again communicated the same background information.
Mayor Martin, do you have comments on this?
Yes, just I know the people, the community would like them kept. I realize that they are costly and they're not totally warranted once the bridge is lifted. And as you mentioned, there are other places. I know, of course, Dutton had requested one earlier on the Highway 3, and we didn't do that one either. So I do have some concerns with it because they're not warranted. They're just, they've been very beneficial and they really have helped move traffic properly. I think the four-way stop at Carlow and Warren makes perfect sense, but there was never a four-way or three-way stop at Warren and
Sunset.
Sunset, yeah. And I'm just wondering if maybe we should put, if we remove the lights, that we should put a three-way stop there. It's a three-way intersection. Because certainly coming out of Warren Street onto Sunset on busy weekends is impossible. It really, in the summer months, it is very difficult to get out of that corner because it's a left-hand turn into a very busy lane. So, and we get a lot of people using that because they're going down to Main Beach, and to avoid the lift bridge, in case it might be up, they go the Warren Street. So, I'm not certain entirely what the solution, what other members of County Council feel. I realize you have funds because we've come under budget for the lift bridge. And I know people in Port would very much like to have this, but I certainly will defer to the rest of County Council as to their thoughts on this.
Councilor McPhail.
Just to refresh my memory, I can't get back to the report. Has this been officially requested from Central Elgin Council for consideration?
Yes.
Has been, okay.
Councilor Jones, or actually Councilor Jiguer was first. Sorry.
Doesn't matter, but thank you, Mr. Warden. Yeah, certainly for me, having the funds is not the criteria that I would use to make the decisions. I know that in other parts of the county, for example, in Port Bruce, we hesitated, or certainly staff advised not to study the traffic or not to implement any kind of traffic calming solutions until the new bridge was fully reopened. And in other words, if you're in a temporary state of traffic flow, not to install or invest in permanent traffic solutions. So I certainly would not be in favor installing something permanent when we don't have all of the data of what traffic flow will look like when things are reopened and traffic flow is back to normal.
Thank you. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Yeah, being a local person and trying to get off of Warren onto Sunset on a busy weekend is like Councillor Martin says, is almost impossible. I think possibly the three-way stop is Stein solution might be a better solution temporarily, just to see if that actually helps. I know it would help off of Warren Street for sure. I don't know if that's would be a safety issue for the county though. So I'd have to defer to Brian whether that's a viable option or not. But I think it might be a temporary solution just to see if that would help.
I have a question for Brian. Brian, I live out north of St. Thomas, and most of my adult life I travel across a temporary bridge into St. Thomas at Dalewood. And the city has recently completed a beautiful new bridge now, but that temporary bridge was there in excess of 40 years. How temporary are our lights there? Like, what if you just left them?
In response to your question, Mr. Warden, it's really a decision of council. The intent right from the get-go of this project was that these traffic signals would be removed once the bridge was fully rehabilitated and reopened to the public. So in terms of lifespan of those signals, if they were intended to be left permanent, probably looking at a life cycle of about 10 years, I would say. And many of the controllers that are in place there and provided by the contractor were more or less hobbled together, bits and pieces. So they certainly don't necessarily meet the county's design criteria, but they are functioning, and we could certainly live with them in that regard. Hopefully that answers your question.
I would
Brian?
anticipate it. Go ahead, Sally.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. What I have, if we removed it, if we remove those temporary lights and we put in a three-way stop there, is that going to cost us more to put permanent lights back when they're needed or not? Because certainly with Kokomo coming on side, that is going to add huge amount of traffic coming out that road. And as we just approved, phase 2, or we had that today, these are going to add a lot more cars and a lot more homes coming out Warren Street, because that's the way all of them are going to come pretty much, or a lot of them. So I'm just, is it more cost efficient to leave the lights, put the lights in, or put the permanent lights in now, or would it be okay to remove them, the temporary ones, and then put the three-way stop, and then when it warrants it, put the lights in? Because I think eventually it's going to warrant lights there.
Yeah,
maybe not at Warren and Carlo, but certainly at Warren and Sunset.
Mr. Warden, in response to Councillor Martin's inquiry, certainly it's cheaper in the interim to keep the signals in place. A new set of signals today, permanent installation would likely cost you in the order of $300,000 to $500,000, and the range is really dependent on, in addition to lights, what sort of pedestrian treatment is required in terms of crossing and so on and so forth. I would note, however, some improvements were made specifically at those two intersections, and in that regard, it would likely be on the lower end of that cost estimate.
Councillor Jones.
Just further to that discussion, I'm not sure how far the county has gone with road studies in that area, but with the possibility of Kokomo coming on a greater degree as far as traffic goes, is it possible that more with the replacement of Meeks Bridge is going to be a push for traffic to come out Sparta Line into Union too as well, and that could force an issue in Union? So just a thought, Brian. Not sure where if you put any consideration into that or not, but with the two-lane bridge at Meeks, it's going to be more appealing for people to head that direction as well out of town.
Mayor
Yeah,
Martin,
through
I
you,
don't know what you think, but I'm wondering if this could, we've had a request from a counselor from Central Elgin. And to be honest, I thought it'd be a fairly quick no. I think there's possibilities here. I wonder if this could go back, because I'd hate to make some kind of decision. I'd like to know what our staff, maybe Central Elgin may have to come up with some money, but in the long run, it may be beneficial to us. But I would like to hear the recommendations from our staff rather than myself. We have an opinion, but that's why we pay staff. Do you have
Yeah,
an
Mr.
opinion
Warden.
on that, Sally?
Yes, and I know that we, I mean, council did pass this and staff were present and didn't advise against it. They just advised at the time that because they were county roads, and it would be county lights, that they felt the county should assume the cost of the lights. But we certainly could take it back to council and discuss it if that would be the request.
Well, Grant's point, a lot of traffic goes out to the north, and with the Meeks Bridge, that's going to be one less outlet to get out. Maybe even if these lights are deferred until we get into the fall, the summer traffic is over even, but I'd really like to have an opinion from our staff if they had a wish list before we make this decision. But Councilor McPhail?
Mr. Warden, certainly Councillor Jaguar's comments resonating with me in the fact that we're basing future plans on things that may not be the same once everything returns to normal. And certainly I would think that giving our staff a fair chance to apply the criteria that they apply across the county, possibly I think we should wait until the bridge is up and running and we actually see just what is on the ground before we make any decisions.
Councillor Purcell?
Mr. Warden, I'd be happy to make a motion that the temporary lights stay in place for up to 24 months after the completion of the bridge, so county and the proper assessment of traffic flows can be completed, with a recommendation at that time to either replace with permanent or they don't justify, and based upon the new numbers and the new developments and the new bridge, and et cetera. So that gives Brian and his team 24 months after the completion of the bridge to recommend what we do with the temporary lights.
Councilor McPhail?
Just a question, Brian, are we currently renting these temporary lights? And is there going to be a substantial cost for using them for another 24 months?
Mr. Warren, to Councillor McPhail, this is an inquiry that I will have to make of our contractor and provide a response back. There is likely a cost, a rental cost, I envision, and unfortunately I don't have that cost before me.
Councillor, Deputy Warden Mennel?
Mr. Warden, I think there's a whole lot of unknowns here. I suggest we defer the recommendation until we have a little more information from Brian as far as rentals and completion date of the bridge. So I would suggest we defer for today.
Councillor Purcell?
I'm happy to second that. Brian knows what we're trying to accomplish, and we're trying to do this in a sensible manner. And if those lights are working properly and they're good interim solution, and we anticipate a substantial change or a reason to go ahead with the lights later, we might just as well do it smoothly. So I'm happy to defer and let Brian come back on that basis.
All right, thank you. And once Brian gets that cost, that Central Elgin may decide that that's something that they're willing to entertain. But so we have a motion. Everyone clear on the motion? Julie, do you want to read it again so we know exactly what we're voting on, please? You're on mute.
I would recommend that the report titled Port Stanley Temporary Traffic Signals from the General Manager of Engineering, Planning and Enterprise dated April 1st, 2021 be received and filed, and that a follow-up report from the General Manager be provided to Council in response to Council's feedback.
Seeing heads nod, yes. So, all right, please go ahead and call the vote.
Deputy Warden Mennel.
Yes.
Councillor McPhail.
Yes.
Councillor Purcell.
Yes.
Councillor Martin.
Yes.
Councillor Jones.
Yes.
Councillor French.
Yes.
Councillor Jiguer.
Yes.
Councillor Ketchabah.
Yes.
Mr. Warden.
Yes,
9-0, the motion is carried.
thank you for that. General Manager of Engineering, Planning and Enterprise, Thames Sydenham Source Water Protection Committee. Brian, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. The current term for the joint Elgin, Essex, and Chatham-Kent seats on the Thames Sydenham Region Source Water Protection Committee currently filled by Mr. Brett Clutterbuck, is set to expire on June 1st. With the support of Elgin County member municipal CEOs, the County of Essex, and still subject to acceptance and support from the municipality of Chatham-Kent. I'm happy to recommend Mr. Clutterbuck's joint reappointment for another 4-year term that will begin on June 1st and expire on June 1st, 2021 and expire on June 1st, 2025. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Grant, Councillor Jones, go ahead.
Yes, obviously, Brett is our drainage superintendent for Southfield and Dutton Dunwich, and Brett is a very capable and knowledgeable person in this matter. And I'm happy to move this.
Councillor Bob.
I'm just happy to second it.
This one makes a lot of sense. So, any further questions? If not, Julie, call the vote.
Deputy Warden Mennel.
Yes.
Councillor McPhail.
Yes.
Councillor Purcell.
Yes.
Councillor Martin.
Yes.
Councillor Jones.
Yes.
Councillor French.
Yes.
Councillor Jiguer.
Yes.
Councillor Ketchba.
Yes.
Mr. Warden.
Yes,
9-0, the motion is carried.
thank you. On to Manager Administrative Services, Corporate Internet and Password Protected Portal Cost and Annual Licensing Fee. Catherine.
Thank you, Mr.
Good morning.
Warden. Good morning. Through you to County Council. The report before you highlights a discrepancy between the estimated and actual cost of the corporate internet and password protected portal and the amount that was budgeted for in the 2021 budget. Staff are seeking Council's direction regarding how the unbudgeted amount and the annual licensing fee should be funded and the length of the contract with Sandbox Software Solutions. In October 2020, a report to Council indicated that the development of an intranet would cost between $70,000 and $90,000. And at a subsequent budget committee meeting, the annual licensing fee was estimated at $17,500. On April 6th, Council approved a contract with Sandbox Software Solutions at $57,156.19, with an annual licensing fee of $17,495. When the contract was awarded, it was discovered that a discrepancy between the estimated costs and the budgeted costs had happened. The budgeted costs were only $40,000 included in the 2021 budget for development, and no licensing fee was accounted for. This was an oversight on the part of staff who did not notice this discrepancy during the budgeting process. This discrepancy can be attributed to a confusion surrounding the funds that are earmarked in the budget for the redevelopment of the corporate website, which amount to $40,000 and no licensing fee. This amount was erroneously attributed to the internet redevelopment instead of the estimated amount that was presented to Council in October. Staff are recommending that the unbudgeted development amount from the contract award, which amounts to $17,156.19, be taken from efficiency reserve funding. Additionally, staff are seeking Council's direction on 2 items. The first item is the length of the contract with Sandbox Software Solutions, and the second is how the annual licensing fee should be funded. Firstly, in the intranet RFP, it was indicated that we wanted an option for a 5-year contract. Sandbox Software Solutions has offered a 5-year contract where the licensing fee will not increase. So the $17,495 per year will not increase over the 5 years. So for the first option is to enter into a 5-year contract at this rate. The second option is to enter into a 3-year contract with the option to renew for an additional 2 years, also with no increase to licensing fee. The third option is to enter into a 1-year contract, which is not recommended considering the amount of investment in funds and time to develop the intranet. It is unlikely that we will want to abandon such a useful tool after 1 year. In terms of how the annual licensing fee should be funded, Council has several options to choose from. The first option is that the annual fee of $17,495 be funded from the Efficiency Reserve Fund as well in 2021, and that ongoing licensing costs and where to fund those be considered as part of the 2022 budget process. The second option is that efficiency reserve funds could be used to cover the cost of licensing fees from 2021 to 2030 for a total of $188,861 over the course of 10 years. Currently, there is $625,000 in this efficiency reserve fund, and funding the internet licensing costs would leave $436,000 available for future allocations. The third option is to include the annual licensing fee of $17,495 in the IT budget, in their annual operating budget as an operating cost, in accordance with how many other licensing fees and the corporate website is budgeted for. I am happy to answer any questions that council may have for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Good report. What's the best way to fix this small error? I'm open for your suggestions. We have options there. Councillor Jones.
I guess if we started out with the efficiency fund, I'm okay with that. I think at some point we have to, I'm going to defer to the finance committee, but there's going to have to be a phase in or transition period where otherwise at the end of this term, there's going to be probably a huge jump in a budget someplace. Obviously 17,000, whatever. At the end of this cycle is going to be a lot more than 17,000, I would think. So just a thought to throw back to the finance committee.
Dominique.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. I guess one question to clarify for me is, do you still need the corporate website budget? So, or is the intranet work also covering whatever work is needed on the corporate website?
Catherine?
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Through you to Councillor Jiguer. The corporate website is only scheduled to be updated every 3 years. 2021 was a year that we were scheduled to update the website, but based on how the website is currently working, we often do try to stretch out the life cycle of a corporate website, and we have determined that we do not need to redevelop the website in 2021, nor do we need to do so in 2022. So we do not need that $40,000 this year, nor do we need it next year.
Go ahead, Dominique.
Mr. Warden, so I can't remember exactly in the budget, but you basically budgeted like $13,000 every year for 3 years, and then you spend the 40 on the third year. Because I'm thinking if that's the case and we don't plan to use it, then option 3, at least it sounds like we can fund this with the operational budget and then top it up with the whatever extra $4,000 that's missing from the efficiency reserve.
I would, that's my guess. I'm looking, Julie, your head's nodding, or do you have an opinion on that? You're on mute again.
Pardon me. Jim, any comments on that one from a finance perspective?
From a finance perspective, we can certainly allocate the money as council directs. My only concern would be is if in the future we come back and we say, well, we do need money for the website development. That's why that wasn't put down as an option right now, because it was felt that it was still required in the future. But if Catherine and the team feel it's not needed, then we can certainly use that money and then not use as much of the efficiency funding. The other thing maybe to interject on is, I mean, the purpose in my mind with the efficiency funding was to fund these needs to help improve the operational efficiency of our organization. Intranet being one of those tools that helps us. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, everything started spinning there for a minute. And it wasn't me, it was my screen. So the efficiency funding is a perfect use of the money towards intranet, and so to the extent that it's required, I think it's a perfect source. It doesn't require any changing in terms of in the future increasing taxes, because there's money that's been set aside for this purpose. And if to the extent that we can tighten up the website development and allocate money from there, I'm good with that as well.
All right, I have Duncan's hand up and then Sally.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. As council, we have a whole lot of options here. From my perspective, we do have people that understand the finances, and as Jim says, where we can find money here and find money there. We have people that understand the intranet as something that we really need. What I haven't heard from anybody yet is from the professionals who are on staff. Can you give me any indication of what your preferred options would be to move forward with this?
Who would like to answer that? Catherine, go ahead.
I can speak to the length of the contract. As staff, our preferred option would be to enter into a contract for 3 years with the option to renew for an additional 2. That gives us 3 years to get the intranet up and running and to implement it with staff and to see how it's going. And if things are going well and we want to continue with Sandbox Software Solutions, then we have that option to continue for an additional 2 years at the same locked-in price. In terms of options as to where we should fund this from, I will defer to Jim for that.
Jim?
And beyond the 5 years, I mean, the reality is if we do it for 5 years, we're going to do it for the latter 5. It may not be with this company. It could be potentially with another supplier, but I don't see the need for the intranet going away, so that the funding really needs to be planned for the 10 years for the duration of the plan. And as I said earlier, I would recommend at this point in time taking the money out of the efficiency funding to allow staff to do more of a deep dive on what's really required on the intranet, the internal website, or the external website, excuse me. And then if that money is not required, or some of that money is not required, then we can move that back into reserve at that time.
Just before I go to Sally, I have to say the 3 years with the optional 2 makes perfect sense to me. But Sally, your turn.
Yes, I was going to recommend the 3 with the optional 2 as well. And I think taking the money out of the efficiency fund for the rest of the capital that's required. And I think taking the $17,495 out of the efficiency fund for 1 year and then working it into it so that we're not depleting the efficiency fund too far. That would work it into the budget for 2022, but take it out for 2021. That would be my recommendation.
Are you prepared to make that a motion? Because I see a bunch of heads nodding.
Yes, I would. Duncan?
I'll second it.
Right. Julie, are you clear on that?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Warden.
Are we ready for the vote? Go ahead.
Deputy Warden Mennel.
Yes.
Councillor McPhail.
Yes.
Councillor Purcell.
Yes.
Councillor Martin.
Yes.
Councillor Jones.
Yes.
Councillor French.
Yes.
Councillor Jiguer.
Yes.
Councillor Ketchba.
Yes.
Mr. Warden.
Yes.
9-0, the motion is carried.
Just looking over at the clock, we've been going at this for an hour and 3/4. Is everyone fine? Do you want a short break? Count, all right. We take 3 5 minutes. Chief Administrative Officer, Julie, go ahead.
Thanks, Mr. Warden. Through you to members of council, on January 26th, council received and filed correspondence from Oxford County, and that correspondence indicated support for the Township of Zora's school retention plan. On February 10th, council requested additional information regarding municipal support for Zora's school retention plan. Elgin County has, over the past several terms of council, engaged in considerable school retention efforts. And these efforts, some of which are included in your report. I have met with Zora Mayor Marcus Ryan, Councillor Martin, and our school board rep, Megan Ruddick. And with significant support from neighboring municipalities, it is recommended that Elgin County adopts its own school retention plan in the spirit of solidarity with our neighbors to ensure a consistent approach to advocacy across the region. It is anticipated that a school retention plan can be developed and presented to council within 2 months' time, and I would be pleased to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you for that report. Any questions, comments? Deputy Warden Mennel, please.
I would support the recommendation by staff that right now that things are pretty quiet just because COVID has really thrown everybody for a spin. But when things get back to normal, about every 10 years, all of a sudden, there's a decision to close some rural schools. So I think we need to adopt this.
Councillor McPhail.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Just a quick question to Julie. Where does our neighbor Middlesex County fit into this scheme?
That's a good question. So Middlesex County supported a resolution from the municipality of Thames Center, one of their lower tiers. And really the resolution or recommended motion that is before you is almost exactly the same as the Thames Center resolution. So we would be undertaking a similar action should council approve the recommendations before you.
Go ahead.
Just to follow up on that, so is Middlesex County as a entity proceeding down the same road as the rest of us?
Yes.
Thank you.
Further questions? Deputy Warden, you move that?
Yes, I have.
All right, it looks like Purcell would like to second it. All right. No further. Go ahead,
Question,
Dominique.
Mr. Warden, can you clarify what is the resolution? The one in the report talks about supporting the resolution from Thames Center. And I understand that we have a second part that also directs staff to create a retention plan for Elgin County. Are those the two resolutions?
No, so that is included, if I may, Mr. Warden, through you to members of council. The recommended motion before you is be it resolved that Elgin County Council support the resolution passed by the municipality of Thames Center on January 18th, 2021, which includes the following. For Elgin County Council to include a school retention plan as part of our strategic plan and advocate accordingly. So that is the first piece, which is that staff would develop an Elgin County school retention plan, followed by ongoing membership in the Community Schools Alliance. Support through resolution, and the rest of the recommendations, I see some heads nodding, are before you.
Mr. Warden, could we clarify then, just in the first statement, could we rephrase to say that the municipality being referred to is Elgin County? Just so that it's absolutely clear. Because we mentioned Thames Center and we mentioned in sort of the stem of the front. Thank you.
Are the mover and seconder fine with that?
Yes.
Okay. Then
Mr. Warden, I don't know if this is the time, but I'd like to ask a question.
go ahead.
I sit on this, our school, the one committee on rural schools, that we're working on, and we've done, as I said, a think tank, a thought exchange, sorry, where we had 458 people express their opinions on what was needed to help retain rural schools and why they were important to be retained. And one thing that we would like to do as a committee now is to go out in person. Now, obviously not during COVID. So this may not be for another year. We're not going to rush it. We're going to do it when it's suitable. But we'd like to go out and have public consultation meetings, 3 in each of the counties. And so they would like, but what they want is they want public support from our municipalities. So we want the communities to know that we are working with the school board to try and retain rural schools. And so to demonstrate our commitment, they're asking if we could possibly host these, like 3 in Elgin County, 1 in the west, 1 in the center, and 1 in the east, close to where schools are concerned. So I did talk with Mayor Mennel and about possibly 1 in Springfield, because I know the Springfield people have been very active and very concerned, and I'm sure we would get a lot of people out to a public meeting where there would be storyboards there, and then there would be questions asked, and they would have a chance to give their opinions. I realize I see circling, so maybe I'm cutting, I don't know. I would also like to have 1 out in West Elgin, and I think somewhere near West Elgin Secondary School, because that's been threatened many times. And I think the people in West Elgin would be also very keen on this. And I did leave a message for Councillor McPhail, but somehow he either didn't get it or whatever, but I did leave one on the phone once for him. But I would like to see if possibly the West Elgin Community Center, or it could be in Dutton as well, that these, if we would be willing to host these, and I certainly am bringing it to Central Elgin to see if we're willing to host these for free in one of our community halls to show that we are very strongly in support of this as well. So that is not part of this motion, but I just thought you might like to know that that's what we're doing at the moment, or asking for.
Councillor McPhail.
So you to Mr. Warden, to Sally, certainly I apologize. It's not a situation that I'm ghosting you on a call. I haven't received any, or didn't get a message from you. So now that I'm aware of that, if you would like, I do have a council meeting on Thursday. Certainly I can ask council to support this endeavor, and certainly do it in principle right now, because there will be more information coming forward, will there not?
Are you there, Sally?
Yes, I am. Sorry, I keep circling, so I'm not sure. It's cutting in and out badly. I thank you, Councillor McPhail. I very much appreciate that. Councillor Mennel said he was going to bring it to his council, but I haven't heard back from him yet.
I've talked to the CAO, and we're going to be bringing it up and probably under new business.
All right. I'm looking to Julie. Is this a part? Should we vote on this motion separately and then entertain this?
No, Mr. Warden, I would stick to the motion and recommendations before you. And
That's what I'm looking. So
Help.
we need to vote on this. So we're clear what we're voting on here. This Sally's is aside from this. Certainly good information, but we do this motion stands on its own. So are we clear on that? If we are, I'll ask Julie call the vote.
Deputy Warden Mennel.
Yes.
Councillor McPhail.
Yes.
Councillor Purcell.
Yes.
Councillor Martin.
Yes.
Councillor Jones.
Yes.
Councillor French.
Yes.
Councillor Jiguer.
Yes.
Councillor Ketchabah.
Yes.
Mr. Warden.
Yes,
9-0, the motion is carried.
thank you. All right, moving on to council correspondence. I do not believe we have any, do we, Julie?
No.
Right. Items for consideration. I don't believe we have any. Items for information under a consent agenda, and I do not believe we have any. We're up to other business. We have any statements, inquiries by members? Notice of motions. Matters of urgency. New business at all? I will just quick report. I was asked yesterday to go to Pinafore Park and tape the 28th of April is the day of mourning for injured workers killed, and it's kind of a sad day for many. So I was asked, I went out and give some short remarks on behalf of the county, and we will be flying the flag for the 28th of April, just for information. Nothing else from members? I think we're at, need a motion, go into closed session, Julie?
Yes, please.
All right. Moved by Deputy Warden Mennel.
Martin will
Second
move.
by, all right, Catchable, I had you first. Sorry. Call the vote, please.
Deputy Warden Mennel,
Yes.
Councillor McPhail,
Yes.
Councillor Purcell,
Yes.
Councillor Martin,
Yes.
Councillor Jones,
Yes.
Councillor French,
Yes.
Councillor Jiguer,
Yes.
Councillor Ketchba,
Yes.
Mr. Warden,
Yes,
9-0, the motion is carried.
all right. Sorry,
We have to go live.
okay, let's go live.
All set, Carolyn? Great.
All right, welcome back. I'm looking for a motion to rise from closed session. Ketchaba and French. Julie, please call the vote.
Deputy Warden Mennel,
Yes.
Councillor McPhail,
Yes.
Councillor Purcell,
Yes.
Councillor Martin,
Yes.
Councillor Jones,
Yes.
Councillor French,
Yes.
Councillor Jiguer,
Yes.
Councillor Ketchba,
Yes.
Mr. Warden,
Yes,
9-0, the motion is carried.
all right. Motion on the Director of Human Resources.
Sure. Thanks, Mr. Warden. For closed session item number 1, be it resolved that staff proceed as directed.
Mover and seconder, please. Deputy Warden Mennel and Dominique. Thank you. Please call the vote.
Deputy Warden Mennel,
Yes.
Councillor McPhail,
Yes.
Councillor Purcell,
Yes.
Councillor Martin,
Yes.
Councillor Jones,
Yes.
Councillor French,
Yes.
Councillor Jiguer,
Yes.
Councillor Ketchba,
Yes.
Mr. Warden,
Yes,
9-0, the motion is carried.
thank you. Economic Development.
For closed session item number 2, be it resolved that staff proceed as directed.
Ketchaba and Jones, please call the vote.
Deputy Warden Mennel,
Yes.
Councillor McPhail,
Yes.
Councillor Purcell,
Yes.
Councillor Martin,
Yes.
Councillor Jones,
Yes.
Councillor French,
Yes.
Councillor Jiguer,
Yes.
Councillor Ketchba,
Yes.
Mr. Warden,
Yes,
9-0, the motion is carried.
thank you. Motion to adopt recommendations from the Committee of the Whole. And moved by McPhail, second by Purcell. Call the vote, please.
Deputy Warden Mennel,
Yes.
Councillor McPhail,
Yes.
Councillor Purcell,
Yes.
Councillor Martin,
Yes.
Councillor Jones,
Yes.
Councillor French,
Yes.
Councillor Jiguer,
Yes.
Councillor Ketchba,
Yes.
Mr. Warden,
Yes,
9-0, the motion is carried.
thank you. Consideration of bylaws?
Thanks, Mr. Warden. Be it a first, second, and third read of Bylaw 2118, being a bylaw, the Corporation of the County of Elgin to authorize the borrowing upon amortizing debentures in the principal amount of $6 million towards the cost of the King George Lift Bridge.
Mover and seconder, please. Jager, seconder. Ketchabah, please. Call the vote. Thank you.
Deputy Warden Mennel,
Yes.
Councillor McPhail,
Yes.
Councillor Purcell,
Yes.
Councillor Martin,
Yes.
Councillor Jones,
Yes.
Councillor French,
Yes.
Councillor Jager,
Yes.
Councillor Ketchba,
Yes.
Mr. Warden.
Yes,
9-0, the motion is carried.
thank you. Next bylaw.
Be it a first, second, and third read of Bylaw 2119, being a bylaw to confirm proceedings of the Municipal Council of the Corporation of the County of Elgin at the April 20th, 2021 meeting.
Mover and seconder, Mennel and McPhail. Please call the vote.
Deputy Warden Mennel,
Yes.
Councillor McPhail,
Yes.
Councillor Purcell,
Yes.
Councillor Martin,
Yes.
Councillor Jones,
Yes.
Councillor French,
Yes.
Councillor Jager,
Yes.
Councillor Ketchba,
Yes.
Mr. Warden.
Yes,
9-0, the motion is carried.
and it looks like we're running out of things to do. Before we close, I want to thank Julie for keeping us up to date. This COVID is getting a bit scary the last, as you know, the last week, 10 days especially, and Julie is very timely keeping us updated, and I think that helps. My wife Janet and I received our shots at St. Thomas Arena on Friday. No ill effects yet, and it was extremely well run. We've heard that over and over and over, so a good thing. And I know several others either have had them or getting them, so stay safe. It's you know, with some of the recent announcements from the province, we're getting a lot of suggestions from our constituents, our residents, and it's difficult times for everybody. But today was a great meeting. I thank you for that. I wish everyone stays safe. Councillor Jones.
Yeah, Mary Lou and I got our AstraZeneca last week and we're still standing, so don't be afraid of it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Councillor McPhail.
Norman, I've also had our shot and hoping on hope that I was going to start growing hair, but nothing has happened yet.
Oh gosh, sense of humor always helps. But all right, if there's nothing further, I entertain a motion to adjourn. Councillor French, Councillor Jones. Julie, call the vote, please.
Deputy Warden Mennel,
Yes.
Councillor McPhail,
Yes.
Councillor Purcell,
Yes.
Councillor Martin,
Yes.
Councillor Jones,
Yes.
Councillor French,
Yes.
Councillor Jager,
Yes.
Councillor Ketchba,
Yes.
Mr. Warden.
Yes.
9-0, the motion is carried.
All right.